Sally with us from Focus Title. Thank you, Sally, for being here. Um, this is a piece of the process that I think new agents or just, I mean, any agents, they just forget about this piece because they, are concentrating so much on the inspection contingencies and the financing contingencies, and buried in the offer though is this big, very big important piece about the title. So I wanted Sally to go over kind of our role in this process, and that's receiving and reviewing the title commitment, and then also, and really importantly, going over and understanding our closing statements because they rely on our eyes as well, before closing, to go over closing statements to make sure that all looks good on our end as well. So with that, I'll have Sally take it away and yeah, go for it.
All right. Well, thanks, Steph. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me. This just helps bridge the gap between title and agents, right? Um, so the title commitment that we're going to look at today is a both sides, which means Focus Title would be handling the seller side and the lender side. If you are a listing agent and you have an accepted offer, you are going to send us that order. And then from that order, we are going to do a property search. And this is what we would send out to you and your sellers. This is what is needed to make sure that there aren't any liens on the properties. There's like construction or tax. There aren't any judgments, and that the title chain has not been broken, and the people who are selling the property are the sellers, if that makes sense. So you get an accepted offer and then you send it over. Our title examiners are amazing. If there isn't a rush request, it'll be done in about 5 days. And then they will send it to all parties of the transaction. And it will come in your email and it will look exactly like what you're looking at on the screen. And there are some main things on the first page that I just want you to be aware of and to check. So we always want to make sure that the proposed policy amount is the purchase price of your property. Nope, it's the next one up.
Oh, sorry.
Yep, that'd be the first one. Make sure that's matching what your offer states, and if it doesn't, maybe there was an amendment that was missed that you need to send to us. Or sometimes it's just human error because it happens. So if the lender would then send us their order also for the loan policy, and that is what Steph had circled the first time. That's the loan policy amount. It's also going to have who the lender is right underneath that. So make sure that the information that you have matches what's on our title. And then the owner of the property is going to be the seller. So we want to make sure that we look at that to make sure that the seller's name is spelled correctly. If it's in an LLC and maybe you didn't know about that, would need like the LLC documents, things like that. And then on the first page, the very bottom shows the address. We just want to make sure that we're insuring the correct property, right?
I'll say, I'll tack on to that, with your comments about an LLC. Same goes for a trust. So if the property is in a trust, the title company, Sally, and those guys will also need a copy of that paperwork.
You're right. Absolutely.
Just a quick question, if I could.
Yeah.
For a seller, you're getting the listing paperwork together, and I know I've seen before the Focus Title Seller Authorization form.
Yes.
Is that something that you require of us when we're signing the listing papers, the listing agreement, or is that something that once it goes into contract, like what's the timing on it all?
Um, that's a great question. And we need the authorization either way, right? So if
Mhm.
you want to present it to your sellers at the listing appointment, that's a great way to start that piece, with the knowledge that they don't have to put their social security numbers on there. If
Okay.
you provide us authorization, we know that we need to reach out for that sensitive information. If it's overlooked, or we do have a way to send it electronically, which is secure also, if you prefer us to do it that way. It just depends. If we get it
Okay.
at time of order entry, then we reach out for the information we need. If we don't get it at order entry, we then reach out ourselves to the sellers to get that information.
All right. That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on page one? Page two of the title commitment is always going to be the requirements that title needs to complete this in order for the sale transaction to be completed. This is a great form or great document because this is where it tells us if maybe there's an estate involved. Maybe you didn't know that the person selling the property, sometimes we get surprises, and this is an actual estate. This particular title that we're looking at right now actually has a ongoing divorce. So if that were the case, it is requiring us to see the MSA, the marital settlement agreement, if it is finalized. If it's not finalized, then we just need to contact attorney information, because they would have to either agree or the attorneys direct us who holds the proceed funds. Okay. This also is a requirement that there's a mortgage from the new buyer to the lender that's on title. Most of these will be cleared. Well, all of these will be cleared prior to closing and will not be on the final title policy when it's written up. Along with page 3 of the title commitment. These are exceptions that are cleared with our gap endorsement. The special assessment letters, which are included in this, we'll go through those a little bit later. And then also an affidavit that your seller signs. These should all be cleared with those documents, except for 100, because taxes aren't due for the current year. This is 2019, it would be 2025. Are there any questions on requirements and exceptions?
I think what's important to understand though too, just as an agent, like let's say this, MSA requirement, for example, like you guys would be proactive in communicating with the agents. We don't have a copy of this MSA. We need to have this prior to closing, for example. So, I just want you guys to understand you're not to be experts on these, but it's like good to know what to look for. And the title company will be in communication to let you know if they're in need of more decks. So,
Absolutely, yeah, I didn't make it want to sound like you have to be experts, just things to
oh
keep
yeah,
an eyeball out for is.
yes, yes.
Um, Page 4 of the title commitment, this is where we would find any judgments, whether they be construction, credit card, tax liens, anything like that is going to be shown here, and any open mortgages. That is the main two on this page that we look for and we clear. Also, in the footnote section, it will let us know if taxes have been paid. If they haven't, then we know we need to go to the tax portal to get a payoff, so we can put that on the closing statement also. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Judgments and mortgage. Any questions on that?
I'm just curious, like, do you think it's pretty common for title companies, if there is something out of the ordinary, to like flag that to the agent? Or like, I know I need to be reading this in proactive, but I'm just wondering how often the title company might be like, heads up, there's this weird judgment thing.
Um, if a prior title is not provided, and let's say title is working on it, they will reach out to us and say, hey, we found this prior title or prior owner mortgage or a prior owner judgment, or they're very good at reaching out to us, and then we reach out to you guys for a prior title or something. As far as what's actually on here, we don't know until you found out, because they send it to all parties at the same time. So like they wouldn't let us know there was a judgment against the seller prior unless it was real weird or a lot of money. Does that help? Okay.
Yeah.
So on this page, what it's really saying is these sellers have to sell their house. It's a requirement.
Correct.
Okay.
So if they weren't required to do that, just there would be no language to the exceptions under 400.
So number 400 on this exception page is the mortgage that they're paying on the property that they are selling. So we do have to clear that off our title in order for the sale to go through. Did that help?
Okay, so if they didn't have restrictions, then there would be nothing there, even if they do have a mortgage, but it's not required because they have other funds that are not making this be required on this mortgage being satisfied.
I think any
So-
mortgage would be listed. Go ahead.
I was
Kelly.
just gonna say, anytime you purchase a property, the mortgage is the document that's recorded with the clerk of courts that puts the lien on the property. So if they've paid it off and the satisfaction has been recorded, you're right, there would not be a mortgage on this title then. So that is not something that we would need to clear.
Right. Don't remember that the title company ensures us that the transaction closing takes place free of all judgments and liens, encumbrances, judgments and liens. So that's the big job of the title company. So the sale can't go through if there is a lien or a judgment or a mortgage.
Mhm. And that's essentially what the buyer is asking for within the offer to purchase. You know, we want you to transfer the property free of judgments and liens, and that's where title comes in. Good questions. Should we keep going?
That is pretty much our title commitment. The next section that I have are the special assessment letters, and these are requested at the time of order entry also. So when you send us over your accepted offer, along with the title commitment that we're ordering, we are also ordering special assessment letters. Excuse me. And these are usually completed 5 to 7 days also. And we need these documents also prior to closing. And we get our water and tax proration numbers from these letters, along with any special assessments that the city, village, municipality would know about. And the first page is pretty much your overall, like, it gives you a little glimpse of everything, right? It tells you what the tax amount was for the year prior. It tells you if there's any kind of, well, on this one, there is an assessment under special charges. It's for street assessment. And then if the taxes are paid in full. And I like to always do the math of the tax proration and the water proration on the front page. That way, if anybody has any questions, they know where the numbers come from. And it's always good to just double check that also, just to make sure, like if there's an occupancy agreement with the offer to purchase, make sure that the tax proration reflects that occupancy agreement, because sometimes it's through occupancy, sometimes it's not. So the overview of the whole special assessment letter is this first page. I don't know what the second page is, Steph, if it's in order or not. So that's actually a screenshot from the tax portal from the city of West Allis, probably Milwaukee County. And that also lets us know if there are any advanced charges that they've paid the year prior that they would need to get a credit back for, what the actual amount of the taxes are, and if they're paid in full or not.
Good.
The next one is the actual tax bill that they send out. Same information as what we previously saw. The next document is from the city of West Allis, and this is where we get the water proration numbers. Looks like the next three documents are all from the city of West Allis. Oh no, yes. This also should have, if you go back to the previous page stuff, they're right there in the middle. It says, are there any outstanding special assessments? It does not. This one does, yes. It says yes, and then the amount is above it. So this is where we would find out if there were any special assessments, and then we would have to call West Allis to find out the pay off amount for sure. Because sometimes the special assessment letters are done a month, maybe 5 weeks in advance, and we just want to make sure that we have the right amount on the closing statement. The next document is the water bill, and that is where we would get the water proration numbers. We also call on every water bill to make sure that we have the most updated numbers, and if there's a balance due, what it would be, if maybe we're closing after the due date, and if there were going to be inquiring any interest or late fees. These are all the letters that are sent with every special assessment letter, and then focus titles invoice is also included in any special assessment letter, so you know what our charges are. Are there any questions on the special assessment letters? So now this one we emailed West Allis and was given a payoff for the special assessment and good through a couple extra days just to ensure that there's enough funds that if it sits on someone's desk on the 15th, if they open it on the 16th, they'll have enough funds, and then they'd have to refund the amount back to the sellers. All right, are we ready for the closing statement?
Closing statements.
All
Any
right.
questions, all right, guys? All right.
Good. All right, so this is our closing statement that we send out. We like to send it out a week to a week and a half prior to closing to all parties. And by parties, I mean I usually send it to the agents first for pre-approval, and then with your direction, we send it to the sellers. There's a few things up here that you want to make sure is correct. You want to make sure the property address is the property that we're selling. I will say the first section here, the settlement location, is usually the office that you order title through. Not to be confused if it were closing at a different focus title office, it just preemptively puts it in the location that you ordered title through. Can be updated, just let us know. It also has the borrowers and the sellers' names on there. We want to make sure that those are accurate. The biggest thing, though, that I want you to make sure is that the settlement date is your closing date. Usually it's the same as disbursement. There are times when a buyer will sign remotely. We have one today, in fact, that's signing today, but we're not dispersing till tomorrow. So as an agent, you would know that. So just to double check those dates. Moving down, the agreed final sale price of the property is the first number. Want to make sure that that's accurate. On the buyer side, you want to make sure that the earnest money is accurate and accounted for on there. This particular closing statement is part of a rental, so we want to make sure that the rent is a credit to the buyer, because if it's prepaid, then the buyer is going to get a portion of that rent to them. So then the next one would be the taxes. It's a prorated amount for the time that the seller owns the property, and it's a credit to the buyer again. Same with water, based on the last billing. We prorate those numbers and we want to make sure that they're credits to the buyers. The next section is going to be your title and closing fees. If we were wiring, this would be the section, this next section is part of the closing fees. And then the biggest one that I really want you to look at is the commission section. I want you to make sure that what you are supposed to be getting paid is reflected accurately on this closing statement. Make sure your admin fee is in there, make sure your buyer agreement is in there. We do try to be perfect, but of course nobody is, so we really rely on second set of eyeballs. And then the next section is your state transfer. That is the amount that the state charges to change the property from the seller to the buyer. It's all based on the purchase price. Next section would be the payoffs, and that would be where you would pay off a mortgage or a home equity line of credit. This miscellaneous section would be any place where we would have to pay additional bills. This one, for instance, has the special assessment balance that we need to pay, a water bill, and then it also has the security deposit credit because it is a rental. So that section can be either non-existent or rather large depending on the file. The seller's proceed amount that they would walk away with selling this property is that line right there. Yep. So if you did a net proceeds sheet prior, maybe at your listing, you want to see how close you are. That's a great way to double check that.
Mhm.
Did I miss anything, Steph?
I don't think so. Going back to commissions, just in the wake of the changes last August, we just really need to be on top of double checking this. That means getting your calculator out too. I'm always doing that. And just in the different ways that we are addressing commission as well. Just again, please make sure we're double checking that. Is what, yeah, every time. Yeah.
If,
Any questions?
if it's found that there is a special assessment from the city that we didn't know about, contractually, and maybe this is more of a legal question, but contractually, if the buyer wouldn't be okay with that, what's built into our contracts that would allow them to have that as a contingency for sale?
It's actually one of my favorite lines in the contract because it's black and white, but it's all dependent upon time that the assessment was levied. So I can pull up a contract to show you guys. But in essence, it's if a special assessment was levied upon the seller prior to the date that the offer was written, then it's on the seller to pay for it. If it was officially levied after the date of the offer to purchase was written, then it's the responsibility of the buyer to pay it. So that is something that you're gonna want to, I mean, we've had savvy buyer's agents strike that in an offer. I'm just finding it here. Um, minutes. Oh, here we go. So on page 8. Okay, so here we are, special assessments and other expenses. So beginning at bottom of page 7 on 416, special assessments, if any, levied, or for work actually commenced prior to the date stated on line 1 of this offer shall be paid by the seller no later than closing. All other special assessments shall be paid by the buyer. Levied means the local municipal governing body has adopted and published a final resolution describing the planned improvements and the assessments of benefit. So, savvy buyer's agents will strike all other assessments shall be paid by the buyer, for example. Or what else have you seen, Joan? Maybe it's just modifying any levied or work actually commenced prior to the date on line 1 of the offer shall be paid by the seller. I think I've just seen people in the additional provisions say all special assessments shall be paid by the seller.
Yeah,
For example.
the complicated part gets when the payments are spread out over several years.
Mhm.
And so maybe the seller's already responsible. It's been levied, the seller's already paid some of the payments going forward. But in that case, it would seem as if the seller would have to pay all the payments going forward. And that is something probably the buyer and the seller would want to negotiate. And those, I know in Bayside, there had been an assessment that was spread out over several years. And it caused quite a few confusions in this who pays for what. And it comes down to either negotiating or attorneys to decide.
Yeah, and it gives a caution line right here, consider a special agreement if the area assessments, property owners association assessments, special charges for the current services or other expenses are contemplated. So like if you know something is on the docket but hasn't officially been levied, then the buyer might want to consider negotiating that right in the offer. Other expenses are one-time charges or ongoing use fees for public improvements, etc. So, yeah, I mean, again, this is kind of where you'd really have to do your homework ahead of time too.
And it's a good idea maybe to look at who sold properties in that municipality or village or something, and that call them and say, how did you work this out? This ongoing construction assessment. How was it worked out in your contract?
Mhm.
But it is something that is more complicated than just was it levied before the offer was written or after. But
Any
yeah,
other?
reading the contract in its intricacy is important. I think the lesson here, reading the cautions.
Yes. I know that like the offer is setting you up with those cautionary lines, like consider doing this because you were going to get into an argument about it.
Yeah, plan ahead.
Yes. But also just for new agents, brand new agents. I just know that this was a piece that I struggled with as a new agent because I was like, I'd get these title commitments and I'm like, I have no idea what to do with this, So it's just like communication flow, you know, like you're gonna receive it. Know that if there is something major, you will be told about it, right? And any, you know, from the listing perspective, you know, like Sally and the team will be in touch with you, like you need to get X, Y, and Z, or this judgment came up, you know, just as a heads up, this is going to be paid at closing. So when I'm passing these things along to the clients, you know, if I can see a judgment on there, you know, I'll say like, okay, I see that this came up, just a heads up. Or more likely, it's all fine, and I'm just saying no need to take action on this. You're just going to save this for your records, and the title company will also be going over the closing statement with you at closing. So, and then likewise, yeah,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
no, just like likewise with a buyer as well. You know, all looks good. No need to take action. You'll receive the final commitment after closing, and you're going to want to save that for your records to provide when you go to sell the house. So, what were you
I
going to say?
was going to say, consider ourselves lucky. My mother was a real estate agent in the 60s and 70s, and the company she worked for, the listing agents had to draft the closing statement. They had to do all the math, all the
Yeah,
and everything. And boy, when I try to reflect on doing that myself, it would be very difficult.
totally.
Thank goodness for focus title.
Mhm. So, okay, that's a short one. Thanks for your time today,
Well,
Sally.
Thank you.
Any other
can I ask one more question? If I